September 2nd, 1984, a quiet Father's Day in Milperra, Australia explodes into chaos. Gunshots ring out at a biker swap meet. 7 people, including a 14-year-old girl, lie dead. This is the story of the Comancheros and Bandidos, two outlaw motorcycle clubs who started as brothers but ended in a brutal blood feud. How did it all go so wrong? Let's dive in. Let's rewind to 1966. William George Jock Ross, a Scottish immigrant with a love for order, forms the Comanchero Motorcycle Club in Sydney, a name inspired by a John Wayne film. Ross gave himself the grandiose title of Supreme Commander. He ran the club like a military unit with strict discipline and brutal loyalty. His leadership made the Comancheros one of the most violent Australian outlaw biker gangs of the 1970s and the early 1980s. But with all that power came paranoia. Loyalty to the club was everything, but over time, Ross' authoritarian rule started to stir resentment within his own ranks. In 1983, that resentment hit a breaking point. Jock Ross was caught in a compromising situation with another member's wife. He was summoned to a disciplinary hearing by Sergeant at Arms Caesar Campbell, but Ross ignored the first 2 calls. On the 3rd summon, he finally showed up, only to drop a bombshell. He would split the Comancheros into 2 chapters. One chapter supported Ross, the other sided with Anthony McSnody Spencer, who became the president of the Beach Grove chapter. The other chapter set up its base in Harris Park, but the tension was not over. Things got worse when Ross didn't invite Spencer to his wedding. That made Spencer furious. He sought to show Ross what real leadership looked like. Not long after, Spencer traveled to the US to buy Harley-Davidson parts, stuff you could not get in Australia at the time. There he met Ronnie Hodge, president of the American Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Hodge had a vision. He wanted to move stolen and legit motorcycle parts into Australia and have P2P chemicals smuggled back to the US to manufacture meth. Spencer agreed. A deal was made. A new alliance was born. In November 1983, the second Comanchero chapter officially patched over to become the first Australian Bandidos chapter. Spencer and Charles Charisqueveras burned their Comanchero colors in a symbolic act of defiance. It was more than rebellion, it was war. By early 1984, tensions were boiling. This was not just about jackets and club colors anymore. It was about territory, drugs, and control of Australia's outlaw biker scene. On August 8, 1984, the Bandidos officially declared war. The next day, 3 Comancheros were jumped and beaten at the Bell and Bush Hotel. It was clear a major showdown was coming. The outlaw scene in Australia at the time was already intense. Clubs were becoming deeply entrenched in the drug trade, especially amphetamines. This wasn't Sons of Anarchy-style postering. This was a criminal underworld in full swing. September 2nd, 1984, the Viking Tavern in Milperra, a modest pub surrounded by a bustling car park, hosts a biker swap meet organized by the British Motorcycle Club. Pictures of gleaming motorcycles, families browsing parts, and the hum of casual chatter. It is Father's Day, a day for celebration, but by 1 p.m., everything changes. 19 armed Comancheros rolled into the car park. Jock Ross stood in the opening, trying to bait the Bandidos out of hiding. When no one showed, the Comancheros moved inside the bar, celebrating what they thought was a no-show from the arrivals. They were wrong. About 20 minutes later, 34 Bandidos pulled into the western end of the lot. They handed out weapons, guns, chains, bats, and advanced. The Comancheros were caught off guard. At first it was just shouting, posturing, then a voice cut through. "Put the guns down, let's fight like men." But the words barely left his lips before bang! A single gunshot. No one knows who fired it. It didn't matter. The car park became a battlefield. Guns, machetes, pipes, baseball bats, anything and everything became a weapon. Chaos erupted. Bystanders screamed, some hid behind cars, others ran for cover behind trees. Inside the tavern, some patrons had no idea what was going on. They were watching the Blue Brothers on the bar's TV while the massacre unfolded just outside. Ross, who had not prepared for this kind of ambush, panicked. He ran from the back of the tavern, holding a machete in one hand and a pico in the other. But he was shot in the then hit against in the chest. He dropped like a sack of bricks. Meanwhile, Spencer, the Bandidos president, just sat in his car, watching the battle unfold, clutching his gun. His men would later call him a coward for not joining the fight. Police responded after receiving reports that a man had gone berserk with a rival at the Viking Tavern in Milperra and that shots had been fired. The fighting continued for at least 10 minutes while police helicopters circled overhead. The first of more than 200 police arrived 15 minutes after the fighting ended and cordoned off the area. The damage was catastrophic. 4 Comancheros and 2 Bandidos were dead. But the most tragic loss, the death of a 14-year-old Leanne Walters, an innocent bystander killed by a stray bullet as she stood near her family. Her death, a young life cut short, stuns the nation. 28 people were injured, 20 of them hospitalized. The Milperra Massacre shook the nation. Police quickly arrested dozens. 43 people were charged with murder under the doctrine of common purpose, which means even if you didn't pull the trigger, if you are part of the plan, you were just as guilty. When asked by the police why it happened, Spencer coldly replied, "Yeah, it's a real war too. That Scottish jock, he caused all of these." Nevertheless, Spencer was charged with constructive first-degree murder. The court's indictment alleged that despite not pulling a trigger himself, Spencer's decision as the Bandidos' national president to lead his followers to the Viking Tavern, aware that the violence was likely, made him equally guilty of murder as those who did. Spencer was denied bail and he was jailed in the Park Lane maximum security jail. Later on, he fell into depression and on 20th April 1985, Spencer hanged himself in his cell at the Park Lane maximum security jail while facing charges of first-degree murder. On the other hand, Jock Ross, the Comancheros boss, also received a life sentence, but in 1989, his conviction was reduced to manslaughter. He was released in 1992 after serving 5 years and 3 months. The fallout did stop in courtrooms. The massacre triggered massive public outrage. Ordinary Australians were horrified that such violence could happen in broad daylight in a suburban car park. The New South Wales government responded by tightening gun laws. The Firearms and Dangerous Weapons Act was amended, requiring gun owners to provide a legitimate reason for possessing a firearm. It was a major step in Australia's gradual shift toward stricter gun control. You'd think a tragedy like that would cool tensions, but the violence did stop. The Comancheros and Bandidos remained bitter enemies. In 2002, Ross was disposed by Mahmoud Mick Howie, a younger and more ruthless leader. Under Howie's leadership, the Comancheros got even deeper into organized crime. By 2007, gang wars were raging again. Bandidos defectors from the Nomads triggered a wave of firebombings and drive-by shootings across Sydney. Then came 2009, the Sydney Airport Brawl. 10 members of the Comancheros and Hells Angels fought in front of horrified travelers. It ended with one Hells Angel Club member, Anthony Severus, beaten to death with a metal barrel. Security footage, airport staff, even tourists captured the fight. It became a national scandal. Proof that these clubs were not just weekend rebels, they were violent criminal empires. From brothers to enemies, the Comancheros and Bandidos took a board built on motorcycles and loyalty and turned it into one of the bloodiest rivalries in biker history. The Milperra Massacre was not just an explosion of violence, it was a turning point, a moment that forced Australians to wake up to the growing threat of outlaw biker gangs. Today both clubs still operate not just in Australia but across the globe. The legacy of Milperra lives on in every tough war, every patch over, every drive-by. What began as a tight-knit brotherhood riding for freedom became a cautionary tale of ego, power, and bloodshed. So what do you think drove these men to such violence? Was it about respect, territory, or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this bloody tale gripped you, smash that like button and subscribe for more raw crime stories. Next time we are diving into another biker gang showdown you won't believe. Stay tuned.